Hey, welcome back, everybody. Good Saturday. Hopefully, we're having a wonderful start to the weekend out there. Got an update for you on a couple of storm systems on the horizon and the long range pattern. We're going to talk about what the rest of December has in store. Now, obviously, we are still pretty early in the month, but we're 1 week in and getting closer to that Christmas time frame, and we can kind of start to at least look at some of the ensembles and get the general idea of what we can expect on down the road. But before we get too far on down the road, I am looking at a pretty potent, impactful storm system coming on through next week, right really around the middle of the week, and that could bring some snow and some pretty strong winds and a big shot of cold air on the backside, maybe even a little bit of severe weather. We'll talk about all of that in today's video. Now, if you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Gerald. I'm a meteorology student at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and do so. I think we're like 30 or 20 away from 17,000, so you could be one of the lucky people to kind of get us over that threshold. Also, hit that bell for the latest notifications. It's a great way to stay up to date. Like the video and comment. Let me know where you're watching from. Alrighty, folks, with that said, let's go ahead and dive on into things and start talking some weather here, starting with our satellite loop. This is our upper level water vapor, and I think it's doing a pretty good job right now of showing a general storm motion. Now, you'll notice, obviously, kind of this big dip down here. This is kind of our subtropical jet and a Baja low, as we call it, just meaning we have low pressure out near Baja, California. That obviously is showing up pretty well on radar, and that is helping actually to pump some moisture up here into Texas and Louisiana. That's helping to bring some precipitation to you folks. But also, we kind of have this northern stream energy that is diving down through the country like this here through portions of the Midwest and into the Northeast. That's going to bring a clipper system. In fact, kind of already is. And I'll tell you, this clipper system is actually a little bit stronger than I would say we thought a couple days ago when I recorded a video last. Obviously, I wasn't here yesterday. By the way, if you missed that announcement, I had a final exam at 8 in the morning and a final exam at 5 at night, so it wasn't going to happen yesterday, so I do apologize about that, but hopefully you saw the announcement on the channel. Anyway, though, so that's what we're seeing with the water vapor loop and the jet stream. Again, kind of the two big pieces are going to be all of this northern energy and this southern energy down here, and what those two pieces do over the next week or so is going to be quite important for our weather, and you can already kind of pick those two out on radar as well. It's not hard to find. Here's that Baja low I talked about. That's helping to bring that moisture up into Texas, and then our northern stream energy that is kind of draping down like this, well, that's exactly where all the precipitation is. We've got the one clipper system up here into portions of Canada, northern Michigan, the UP of Michigan, and then we also have some energy back into Seattle through much of the state of Washington and even back towards British Columbia. So plenty of us getting in on some active weather to start the weekend, and that will continue to slowly work on through the country, and we do have watches, warnings, and advisories up for it. Our first little storm system up here into the Northeast, winter weather advisories up here for portions of the UP of Michigan, even into northern Minnesota, and then we've got lake effect snow warnings just south of Buffalo, and winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories up through the Tug Hill. And I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, folks, if we get some new winter weather advisories or special weather statements here through portions of New England, and I'll show you why in a moment. It does look like some snow could make it pretty far inland, and or I guess, kind of the opposite of inland, pretty far towards the coast since it's coming from Canada, and I'll show you that in a moment, but definitely do expect probably some more of those advisories to be issued. Other than that, in the south, it's cold. In fact, I think these are new. Yeah, these are new cold weather advisories. So you see this little baby blue color down into the low country of South Carolina. This is replacing wind chill advisories and the wind chill warnings we used to have. We now have cold weather advisories and cold weather warnings, and they have different criteria, but definitely meeting it down here in the low country of South Carolina. You folks probably not used to cold like this, especially the first week of December as that Arctic front blasted on through yesterday. I definitely felt that one as it moved on through. Now, out west, also some active weather returning. Now, we had pretty quiet weather over the past week or two out here, but the stormy pattern is going to once again return, and that is going to bring some mountain snow into the northern Rockies from Washington State all the way back over to Idaho and Montana, and we are absolutely watching that for you folks, and we will break it down as well in today's video. All right, let's go ahead and talk about these pieces of energy, where they're going, where they're coming from, and why you should care. Well, right now, like I mentioned, we do have our Baja low. You can see that very well on our vorticity map. That is helping, again, to produce some precipitation over Texas, Louisiana, and surrounding states like we talked about. But by the time we get into this afternoon, we're also watching this northern branch of energy. Now, a ton of vorticity out here from the Pacific Northwest that is leading to some diffluence aloft here. So that's helping to kind of bring some of that lift into the Rockies. That's helping to produce that snowfall. But I want you to also watch this little skinny band of high vorticity up into Canada. Specifically, you'll notice probably a little bit of an enhanced short wave here. And what I mean by a short wave is just a tiny little trough embedded in the overall flow. That's the same kind of setup that brought snow to North Carolina a couple of days ago, earlier this week, when we saw snow in the Triad and even the Charlotte area. So these little pieces of energy, they can do a lot of surprising and sometimes fly under the radar on our modeling. This one, though, is being picked up pretty well, and I think it will be a part of a pretty good little clipper system into the Northeast. This is this evening, overnight tonight into tomorrow. You'll notice that piece of energy diving southward, and then all of that energy out into the Pacific Northwest, working on through the Rockies. At the same time that's happening, look at our Baja low beginning to get displaced and moving towards Texas. This is also going to produce some lift and a shield of rain into the southeastern United States within the next couple of days. So it's a complicated map today, and I think honestly from now on, this little map is just going to be the Meteorology in Minutes segment until we have something else I can talk about. So I'm just going to start calling this map when I break down the vorticity and stuff, Meteorology in Minutes. But a lot of energy flying around, a lot of areas that are going to see some lift, some precipitation. Now, it could be snow, it could be rain, depending on where you're at, but definitely an active pattern that has not really gotten quiet, I would say, by any stretch of the imagination. All right, let's start out west here. We haven't talked about the west in a while. I know I've got probably at least a couple viewers still around from out here. The theme today is going to be active weather into the PNW. We've got heavy rain at the coast, rain in the valleys, and snow picking up this afternoon, and especially overnight tonight here into portions of Idaho, Montana, and you'll also notice that rain shield beginning down into Texas. Now, everywhere in between, relatively quiet California, who, by the way, had that massive earthquake and that tsunami scare a couple days ago, relatively quiet weather right now. But other than that, it's really just the Pacific Northwest we're watching. You'll see all of that precipitation blossoming overnight tonight. Pretty good mountain snow through Idaho, back down into Yellowstone, again through the evening and overnight of your Saturday into your Sunday morning, even into western Montana. And then more waves of this mountain snow continues working on through the Pacific Northwest. And we'll talk about all this rain and stuff in the east in another segment here in a moment. But just focusing on the west, it's really the northern half of the west. The northern Rockies going to get some snow, and that will continue over the next 48 hours or so. And if we take a look at how much snow you could expect here, well, it's going to be not a bad amount. It's going to be definitely noteworthy, I think. Blended models going for 2 feet plus here into the Cascades, not far out of Seattle here, and kind of through the belt of mountains all the way back down into Oregon, where lesser totals as you get further south here. But I do think overall, still some pretty good totals down into the mountains of Oregon, and then out here into Idaho. The higher peaks here, a foot and a half plus, not out of the question. Same story for the mountains of western Montana, and then you get down towards Yellowstone, and a good half a foot is probably going to be the average in most places. Again, some places more, some places less. It's always difficult to communicate snowfall forecasts in these higher terrain areas, but I think you folks who have lived here for a while kind of know what to expect and kind of are probably a little bit better at reading this map than maybe some other folks, including myself. I mean, I'm not super familiar with a lot of the higher terrain differences out into this part of the country. But either way, I zoom out a little bit and you'll notice, yeah, pretty good snow here into the Pacific Northwest over the next little bit. All right, now let's talk about this clipper system already producing snow. We saw that on our morning radar. We'll take a look at the latest model guidance, and I do think snow will continue into the eastern upper peninsula of Michigan, up into the northern peninsula, or the northern mitten, rather, seeing some of that snow throughout today. Now, going to be relatively short-lived in this part of the country. By the time we get to this evening, this is 8 p.m. tonight, most of it is out of here, and that low pressure is kind of working through, and you'll notice this even has a bit of a front attached to it, so maybe a little bit less of a clipper system. It's really a frontal system, in all honesty, but it's kind of coming from that usual clipper area and is taking a similar path. So, you dot your I's and cross your T's, I guess, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty. But the point is, you're going to see some snow out of it this afternoon and this evening, and then clearing out by overnight tonight and by tomorrow morning. And then you'll notice another storm system on the horizon, and we'll talk about that one in a second. But really just focusing on that first clipper, that gets in and out of here pretty quickly today. Now, somewhere we're going to see this guy for a little bit longer is the Northeast. You'll notice right now, relatively calm, at least it was this morning. We get into this afternoon, Lake effect kind of beginning a little bit more here along the Tug Hill, but then here comes that piece of energy, and we've got some pretty good snow breaking out. This is this evening, probably 5, 6, 7 p.m. local time. Snow through the Finger Lakes, the Adirondacks, through the Tug Hill, and look at this work inland into Massachusetts. We've got snow falling in Boston potentially overnight tonight, down through Hartford, Providence. You folks in Rhode Island who haven't seen snow yet, this could be your opportunity overnight tonight. This is 11 p.m. local time, and then we get to 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. It's snowing down near the Cape. So places that have not seen really any snow this year could pick up some, decent amounts out of the storm, snowing in Maine and through all of Vermont, New Hampshire, and New York State as the system moves through. And then by the time we're waking up tomorrow morning, beginning to clear out, and then through tomorrow afternoon, really clearing out. So it's going to be one of those storms that don't blink or you'll miss it. It'll be during the overnight, but I do think a lot of folks are going to wake up tomorrow morning with some snow on the ground who maybe are not quite expecting it. And if we take a look at some totals here, I have the blended models pulled up, but let's take a look at the HUR itself because I am interested to see what it says. And I have not checked it yet either. I'll move this all the way ahead in time. Yeah, you'll notice that the highest totals here are obviously going to be back up into upstate New York through the Adirondacks, through the Tug Hill, but much of Vermont, New Hampshire, 2 to 4 plus inches of snow. Down here, western Massachusetts, 3 to 5 inches. But you get to Boston, Providence, Hartford, even into the Cape here. We are talking accumulating snow, maybe a dusting to an inch plus in places. And I definitely think that this will be a storm that is a fun little novelty event for you folks. Not going to cause big travel disruptions tomorrow. So if you have plans to go to church or do some Christmas shopping on your Sunday, I'm not expecting a big deal, at least Boston, Hartford, the Cape, and into Providence. Now, further north into Vermont, New Hampshire, higher snow totals, but you're equipped for it anyway. It's wintertime, you expect that sort of thing. So nothing off the charts to worry about there. I will show you the blend of models as well here. And you'll notice, kind of like what the last model said, the highest total is going to be up here into the Adirondacks, into the Tug Hill, into the mountains of Vermont, New Hampshire, and then probably a dusting upwards of an inch from Bridgeport, Providence, Boston, back down into the Cape. Now, Bridgeport may be a little far south. New York City, I think you're also going to be a little far south for this, but especially Hartford, Norwich, Springfield, Brockton, Boston, Lowell, and then higher totals as you get up towards Manchester, Concord, Lebanon, Berlin, Rutland, and then eventually, obviously, the higher trains of Vermont going to get some pretty good totals, and up into Maine as well. Probably looking at a good 3 to 5 inches of snow out of this one. All right, let's go ahead and break down kind of the next storm system now. So that's the first little clipper. I'll move this ahead a little bit into time. This is this afternoon. We talked about everything happening up in the north already. What about outside of there? Well, like I mentioned, it's going to be raining pretty good into Texas today as that Baja low piece of energy kind of begins to work itself eastbound a little bit, and that will be a common theme. Now, overnight tonight, that clipper works through, rain continues into the south, but our two pieces of energy I talked about, our northern stream and our southern stream, are eventually going to link up here with our next storm. This is tomorrow afternoon, Sunday. I'll go ahead and draw a little bit for you. Here is our low pressure in the north. Here is our low pressure in the south. Here's the rain associated with the southern area of spin. Here's the rain and snow associated with the northern area of spin. And what's going to happen is these two are eventually going to meet together, and we're going to get a bit of a boundary to set up across the country here as cold air once again tries to rush in out of Canada. But this time, our southeast ridge down here is going to fight it a little bit, and we're going to get some pretty good warm return, and we're going to set up a pretty big clash zone here. And I think that's going to lead to some pretty strong low pressure forming early and into the middle of this coming week that'll likely ride up the eastern seaboard. But you'll notice we go through your overnight Sunday, we've got heavy rain through portions of Tennessee, Alabama, down towards Mississippi, Georgia, Kentucky, southern Indiana. Then we've got rain to the north and even some snow into the UP of Michigan and northern Wisconsin and northern Minnesota there. And that gets us into the late overnight hours of Sunday, into the wee early morning hours of Monday. And now we'll go ahead and zoom on out here. Let's take a look at some of the latest global model runs. That's about as far as the mesoscale is going to take us. So picking up where we left off, this is Monday morning. I think this shows what I was talking about very well. Here's the boundary. Notice that blue line. This is our 540 line. This is kind of our cold air trying to work south out of Canada thanks to this low pressure trying to kind of advect it southward. But at the same time, we've got our Baja low here and our southeast ridge here that want to kind of instead bring warm, moist flow. So because of that, we're getting rain showers through much of the east. We're getting some snow showers in the north. We're just going to get a lot of lift, and eventually that's going to lead to even more lift. And look at what happens as this boundary sags southward. All of that warm, moist southerly flow out of the Gulf of Mexico is going to clash with that cold air trying to come down out of Canada, and we're going to get low pressure to form along this boundary. Now, this is this coming Tuesday afternoon. We've got synoptically here a setup for a classic antifront. I'll talk about what that is and why we have that here in just a moment, but I'll move this ahead in a time. Low pressure forms a rainy Tuesday afternoon into the southeast through the mid-Atlantic, drying out quickly. You'll notice, again, here's our clash zone, here's our front, here's our boundary. But what happens eventually is the cold air kind of catches up to some of the precip, and a new area of low pressure forms along the coast, and we're likely going to get some snow to break out into portions of the northeast. I think this is really the interior northeast, not so much the I-95 corridor, but the apps from West Virginia, Northern Virginia, northbound into Pennsylvania, New York State, and then up into, especially I think, Vermont, New Hampshire, and then up into Maine. This could be a pretty potent winter storm through your Wednesday into Thursday, and then eventually notice that front crossing all the way through, getting out of here, and another block of cold air settling in behind it, and some snow. Now, I'll show you the European as well, and then kind of break down what this means with an antifront and some other kind of threats potentially with it. Now, one question that I think still needs to be answered is severe weather. Are we going to get severe weather? Right now, I would say a low-end severe weather threat through Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, back down towards Georgia, especially the eastern half of these states. I think we will have enough instability, and there will be plenty of wind shear. So we'll have to watch for severe weather for sure. And that could include a tornado threat, but I think really mostly this is going to be a straight line QLCS wind event. Just given the synoptic setup, but we will watch for other types of severe weather. And again, the days would probably be Tuesday and Wednesday there. European here, though, shows basically the exact same thing as the GFS. You'll notice we kind of get this antifront. Now, what do I mean by antifront? So there's kind of two types of fronts in meteorology, and this is going to kind of be a Meteorology In Minutes continue. We'd have catafronts and antifronts. Now, a catafront is kind of your stereotypical severe weather front, I would say. It's kind of the stuff you see moving through the plains where it's kind of a very sharp divide. Here's your front, and then all your active weather's in front of it. That's where you get your supercells and all the fun stuff. An antifront's a little different. So what happens is we get our front here. Again, I'll kind of draw a crude front. I'll draw a low pressure here, and it's not where it is on the map. Just pretend that there's nothing behind you here. And I'll even draw our warm front here as well. So with a kind of a catafront, what normally happens is you get your warm conveyor to do this. And that brings all of your warm sector out in front of it, and this is where all the exciting weather is. An antifront's a little different. What happens instead is your warm conveyor actually kind of crosses back over your cold front, and you get a lot of lift where those two meet behind it, and that's why we're kind of getting some of that wintry precipitation to happen here over portions of the northeast into your Wednesday and into your Thursday here on both of our models. You're getting that warm conveyor to cross over the cold. That's creating a lot of lift here and leading to some wintry weather on the backside of the storm. And then active kind of rainy weather on the front side as well. It's kind of doing a little bit of both. Now, the places those areas that are normally favored with that sort of thing are going to be west of the Alps. Now, not maybe so much for this setup because it's trended east a little bit, and then over the Appalachia chain itself. So that's why I think Pennsylvania, New York State, Vermont, New Hampshire, those areas definitely could get it. Now, if you're along the I-95 corridor, I think this is just going to be a raw, cold rain. In fact, maybe even a pretty windy rain at that. This is going to really be cranking as it moves up the coast. Same story for the southeast. I really don't foresee any snow down here right now, and I'll show you why as we look at our ensembles. Here is the European. This is the current clipper, or actually let me back this up. This is the current clipper working on through. You see that working on through the northeast. And then there's a little signal early next week around Tuesday. Maybe another little system works on through. That could bring some snow. But then we calm down until here comes that antifront on the European around next Wednesday, Thursday. And notice the favorite areas here inland through the higher terrains of Vermont, upstate New York, back down into Pennsylvania. I think maybe even the mountains of West Virginia, potentially the far northern mountains of North Carolina, up and around Boone, up into Blacksburg, could see something out of this. But really your favorite areas are going to be into the interior northeast. And you'll notice lake effect also ramping back up once again with a setup like this. So definitely noting that. And then the GFS, it's a pretty similar story. Here is our storm signal. Now, higher totals on the GFS into the interior Northeast. We've got a signal of, half a foot plus here through Vermont, New Hampshire, back down into the Adirondacks and the Catskills, and even a small signal down into the Scranton area, northern New Jersey. But I think the European's probably a little bit closer with this. Now, could the GFS be right? Absolutely. Just going off of climatology, though, with how these things normally set up, I would be surprised to get any kind of appreciable snow near the I-95 corridor. Maybe some flakes mix in. We'll see. And again, maybe the models trend back towards one way or the other. But right now, I really think upstate New York, the Adirondacks, Catskills, up into the Green Mountains, and surrounding areas going to be the highest chance of seeing snow out of this, and then even including the mountains of West Virginia, Pennsylvania as well. Plus that lake effect you'll notice cranking back up as another pocket of cold air once again runs over those warm lakes behind this storm system. All right, let's talk about the long run a little bit. I think you've probably heard about Merry Torchmas and winters canceled after this. Well, folks, I'm not really seeing an end to winter. What I'm seeing is a bit of a roller coaster on the way, and you're already feeling that now. It's freezing cold out there for many of you. It's going to become quite warm ahead of this next storm system here through the early part of next week, and you can see that on our height anomaly map. That current blue you see over the east, that's the Arctic front that moved through over the past couple of days. Then we warm up with a ridge in the east, getting into early next week before our next shot of cold air from that storm system I just talked about. And you're thinking, all right, is it ever going to warm up? It's just cold shot after cold shot. I think after that one, by the time we get about a week or so from now, towards the middle of the month, around the 15th, we're going to get what I foresee to be a pretty significant warm up for at least a period. Now, is that going to last for the rest of December? I don't think so. You'll notice that ridging builds in and it becomes quite warm for probably a good, 4 or 5 days plus. And then another signal for troughing in the east begins to develop. Now, not a strong one, but you'll notice these isobars kinking down here and a little bit of blue showing back up here once we get a little bit closer to the 20th, probably the 17th, 18th, 19th, about 10 days from now. And then the GFS wants to kind of lock onto that blue for a little bit longer here as we approach Christmas time, once again showing some troughing in the east, indicating a cooler, stormier pattern. Now, will that change? It absolutely could, folks. But either way, I don't think we're going to be locked into one super cold pattern or one super warm pattern. Now, it's been pretty cold to start the month. I think it's going to get a little bit warmer towards the middle of the month. After that, though, again, I kind of foresee this juggling act, this back and forth between warm and cold, snowier pattern, not so snowier pattern, so on and so forth. And you can see that in the temperature department as well here, I think. Obviously, it's been a very cold weekend right now. As we get into early next week, though, here's that warm up ahead of our next storm system, and then behind it, by the way, talk about a pronounced front here. I mean, it's not hard to see where the front is, draping all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico with all that warm air where that warm conveyor is, and then that cold air on the backside where that polar boundary is. That cools us down pretty significantly once again into the latter part of next work week. And then we get to next weekend onward, warm conditions take over for a period at least, I think probably 4 or 5 days. And then you'll notice that troughing working back in and those cooler temperatures working back in a little bit closer to the 21st, 22nd in that time frame. So it's going to be pretty active. I think we're going to be back and forth between a snowy pattern and a warmer pattern, but I'm not seeing a canceled winter. I'm not seeing the end of snow chances. And I think a lot of folks are still on the table for a white Christmas. I don't think it looks like, an entire half of the country is going to be too warm for it. But obviously, we've got time to get there, and we'll keep monitoring it. All right, folks, with that said, y'all have a great rest of your Saturday. Again, if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and do so. Like the video, comment, let me know where you're watching from. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all tomorrow.